Good morning, everybody. Several weeks ago, I did a quick video on um, property management companies and valuation thereof, and I thought I would do that periodically on a series of businesses that we see a lot of here in Central Florida and give some tips to buyers and sellers to reference when they're going to market on the odd chance that they stumble across the internet. And So that's what I'm going to do today. So I wanted to talk about a business that we have a lot of here in Central Florida, that not so much now, but during rougher times sells to a high degree for a variety of factors, and that is the green industry, lawn care, lawn services. So, I'm a New Jersey guy, and my experience with lawn care up in New Jersey when I was a kid was the lawn care guy was cutting through the spring and summer into the fall, picking up leaves, but he was also the snowplow guy. So, one thing when you're doing research on buying or a business like lawn care is you have to look at the geographic footprint of the business and where it's located, because that in large part dictates the type of customers that you got. So what I'm going to talk about is really oriented around what we see here in Central Florida, and even North Florida, South Florida, but there's some good talking points on that too. So here in Central Florida, they're relatively popular, relatively low capital to get into the business. What you need is a mower, a trailer, and a truck. And even in rough times during the recession, I'd see guys driving Mercedes and Cadillacs pulling a small trailer. Indeed, during the recession, I actually partnered with one of my clients and grew a pretty large lawn care company here in town, which is still out there and does somewhere around the 3 to 4 million mark. And that we're going to talk about a little bit as well. So what's important when you're buying a lawn care company? More accounts is better than less accounts. And what I mean by that is when you have one or two accounts or a large commercial account that makes up 20% of your business, the risk goes up. Subsequently, the valuation goes down. When valuators, independent valuators look in businesses, and in particular when buyers, smart buyers look at businesses, they want to see very low customer concentration. They want to see high density, high logistical density of the accounts where they're close together, because the fundamental things that drive profit margins in lawn care are fuel and labor. And the tighter the route, the less downtime driving, the more consistent the service levels will be, because there's going to be less variables driving impact to consistency of service. So a couple things you need to understand about Central Florida is that the season kind of runs, and it's October 22nd. The season kind of runs on a 6 months on, 6 month off. So what does that mean to you as a buyer? Understand that about October 1, October 15th, or October 31st, depending upon the cold snap, and we just had our first, the grass will go dormant, which means the grass will stop growing, which means you will not have to cut it every week the same as you would in August or July, where it's at its peak growing season. So customers' visual impact of lack of service is mitigated by the cold. The cold lowers the growth rate, which means you don't have to cut it as frequently. And frankly, you shouldn't. I won't get into the agricultural reasons why you don't cut grass during the off season on the same frequency as you do during the on season. But suffice it to say, generally accepted practice in the Central Florida market is to go to every other week or every 10-day service cycle. So what's the net effect of that? Is your labor rates will drop, as will your fuel costs and other costs associated with servicing the accounts. So why are people attracted to the industry? Because it is low barrier of entry. Everybody needs it. So, whether you're a commercial account, a residential account, a government account, a city account, there's a need to cut grass. It's not as if there's a limited supply of customers. And subsequently, the annuity revenue driven, what I mean by that is the service revenue, the weekly revenue that is driven, gives a great deal of consistency to the operator and to the cash flows of the business. So generally what you'll see is residential customers now, as opposed to 10, 15 years ago, are on a pre-bill cycle where a customer will get an invoice the first of the month, have to pay by the 15th, and the service provider is cutting the grass and expects to be paid by the net 30 terms. Why that's important is as the business scales and you get into the commercial sector where it's more common to have terms, that residential customer who's prepaying you really helps you carry the nut, which is your labor and your operating costs. Now, most lawn care companies here in Florida pay their payroll on a weekly basis. And the elephant in the room is that there is a lot of illegals, illegal aliens working in the service industry, cutting grass. They're great people, they do good work, but that's just the reality of it. And there's a political rant one can go on and go down the rabbit hole. We're not going to do that today, but understand, particularly in a time like this where unemployment, I think in Central Florida is like less than 3.5%. Staffing up to do heavy manual labor outside is tough, and subsequently labor goes up. So that point about density is really important to allow you to flex and maintain your margins while your labor is being pressured up from the general economy. Rules of thumb, and this doesn't just come from someone who's bought, helped people bought and sell them over the years, but I owned one and I was a partner in one. Philosophically, you'll find a lot of different ways of running these businesses. They range from totally commercial to totally residential to a healthy mix. And my 2 cents on the topic is from a business standpoint, I always want to have consistent cash flows and I want to hedge risk. So having residential customers and trying to make sure that the residential revenue is sufficient to covering your operating costs for a month is really, really, a benchmark we tried to achieve when we ran our company. Why that was important was, again, that receivables issue from the commercial sector. If you're, net 40 and all you have is commercial, you have to carry basically 2 months worth of operating cash, payroll, wages, gas, just sitting in the bank, and that's just not smart economics. So, our philosophy was to carry enough residential customers to pay for all the bills, plus salaries, plus gas, etc., while we waited on the higher margin commercial customers. Another philosophical thing that you have to wrestle with and decide on is how much enhancement and installation work you want to get into. In a market like Central Florida, mulches twice a year, irrigation is a constant issue, particularly during the winter when freeze snaps cause heads to bust. And you'll get lots of calls from customers during the good times to redo their landscaping. The bad part is it usually happens during your peak op tempo from a service standpoint. So, when you start doing installations, again, more variables, it creates the opportunity to screw up and to have a service impact on your service division. So you really have to be almost run 2 separate businesses where your installation people are doing installation and your service people are doing service, and you don't cross-functionalize. Unless you route your business in a manner where you're doing your service in 4 days and installation on Fridays and Saturdays, or you're doing installation on Saturdays and Sundays exclusive of residential. And I think that's a smart thing to do, simply because lots of stuff can go wrong on installation. You can break electrical lines, you can cut into irrigation lines, you can run out of products, you can kill things, lots of stuff can go wrong. And subsequently, when you're using the same labor force, again, consistency of service and transparency to the customer so they don't even notice a change is critically important to maintaining and growing your business. Things I kind of, also learned in the trade was that there are tipping points in margin. Remember, just as in any business, owner benefit and seller's discretionary earnings factors a working owner. One working owner I've seen generally as the businesses get scaled can generally handle about $1.5 million to $2 million in revenue if they're a really solid operator and they're working maybe 60 hours a week. But they're pretty tired come wintertime. The profit margins on a lawn care route when you're on the truck are exorbitant. You generally are making 40 to 45% depending upon your pricing when it's a one-man band on the truck with a helper. Once you get to 2 trucks, your margins slip a little bit. Again, the variable is going to be labor. To maintain service, you're going to constantly be peppering and adding management or supervisors to ensure that your service levels are held, because your reputation and your brand is vital. Once you get to about 300,000, you have to make a choice. Am I going to get bigger, or am I going to hold? So to give you a feel, I've seen guys making 350, 400 grand, making 150 to 175 net. Usually I would expect it to be about 125 net. Once you get past that 350 mark, you got to go to 6, and subsequently 6 to 1.5. Once you pass 1.5, your margins will not get any better till 2 million. Indeed, I had a call Wednesday from a guy who was with me a year ago. He was doing 4 million. I'd met him 7 years prior. He was doing 350,000 in revenues. Now he's at 4 million, and I told him then, don't get any bigger. You're not going to see any profit. He called me Wednesday and asked me what his margins should be, which I kind of giggled and said, what's going on? And he said, well, I've grown to 6 million, but I'm not making any more money. So, it was tough for him to understand how he could grow and not make any more money. So I said, what is labor today versus what it was 5 years ago? He says, well, I used to pay a crew guy $10, now I'm paying him 14, a crew leader $12, now I'm paying him 17. Right? So your labor's gone up. Subsequently, there's two issues: fuel and labor. Right? Then I asked him what his fuel was, and he said his fuel has gone up from 225, 235 to about 255, 265. And we're in a strange market here in Orlando with the tourism, but net our margins are slimming. So I said, again, remember your scale as you've added revenue. Both your fixed costs, labor and fuel, subsequent to the route and the stops, has gone up. But nevertheless, he also had to add supervisory personnel to make sure that the routes continued to service. So again, problematic in the service business, but don't cry for the guy. He's still netting $1 million on $6 million in revenue, where he was netting $1 million on $4 million in revenue. So lawn care, bottom line, the margins are solid. They're fantastic owner-operator businesses. They're highly attracted to people coming in for immigration visas because of the E1 or the E2 L1 visas. They are subject to some price point pressures, we just talked about. They are also, you see some competitive low balls when times get tough, that people just start coming in. The good news is they don't last. People who jump into the business usually chase the revenue and burn out in about 6 to 8 months because they've financed the mower and or financed the truck, and they thought that revenue was everything, and they misunderstand the margins. These margins don't hold in the coastal areas for a variety of reasons, and they don't hold to the north and to the south of the greater Orlando market for a couple of reasons. One is the temperatures are different. The demographics are different in terms of customer expectations. Here in Central Florida, the lawn guys, just by sheer evolution, learned about the pre-billing function. Up in like Marion County, Gainesville area, the grass is Bahia. You'll see a different demographic, and usually lawn care is like a part-time gig. You don't see large companies operating in a professional manner. It's more of a mom and pop, and their cost of living is lower, so they're a little bit more giving on customers because the properties are larger, so they're making more revenue per stop type deal. And you're not living in a city like Orlando, your cost of living's higher, so they're a little bit less disciplined about instilling some customer management. And to the south, the reality is it's warmer, so you don't see that hard cutoff around the October date that we see here in Central Florida. So that is going to be a summary of our lawn topics. My bona fides on this is I've probably sold 100 of these things in 15 years. I was a part owner of one. We scaled it from 150 to $4 million. I understand the business intuitively from the operational components of it, and just touch enough of them long enough to get to know it backwards and forwards. So I'd be more than happy to give you my insights on your business, talk to you about the prospects with regard to selling it, what its value is, how it plays in the marketplace as related to E2s and visas, and or how you SBA these things when you want to sell it. That's really, really critical, as you don't play fast and loose with the books and records as you scale them up past that million mark, because you're not going to get someone with $1 million in cash. to buy a lawn care company. So as always, visit me at my website, www.yourfloridabusinessbroker.com, or call me at 321-287-0349. Thanks.